All right, good morning. I'm State Representative Mark Bourne, the Assembly Co-Chair of the Joint Committee on Finance. I'm pleased to be here with a number of my colleagues and some local officials from the area today. Also being joined all over the state by more of our colleagues and other local officials to make an exciting announcement today on legislation that will bring historic investments and reforms to the shared revenue system here in Wisconsin. That's an important system that sends money to our local governments to invest in important services that our citizens expect them to provide. The legislation that we'll be bringing forward today, as I said, is historic. It's really the most that we've seen in a generation or more, probably the most since the system was created. There's two funds that bring new money of more than $500 million of new money. Overall, it's transferring 20% or 1 cent of the sales tax into a SIG account that will focus on funding current and then those new funds for local governments. So we're certainly excited to have this opportunity. This opportunity is really brought to us today by, I think, two key things. One was the local officials telling us what their needs were, really educating us on the challenges that were being faced, both with the need for new money, but also that the current system wasn't sending money everywhere it needed to go. And then our Republican leadership here in the legislature already last year in both houses, the Senate and the Assembly, recognizing that this is something we wanted to tackle and really assigning key leadership members in both houses to focus on creating this legislation that's here today. Certainly in the Assembly, Speaker Voss last fall chose Tony Kurtz, Representative Kurtz, to lead in working with our caucus and stakeholders. No surprise to anyone, he's done a great job with that. And I'm going to pass it on to him now to talk a little bit more details about the legislation.
Thank you, Representative Bourne. Well, good morning. My name is State Representative Tony Kurtz. I'm very proud to represent the 50th Assembly District in beautiful Juneau County and the best parts of Sauk, Richland, and Vernon County. You know, this has been quite a long journey. Back in the spring of 2022, myself and a couple other rural legislators met in Speaker Voss' office and talked about some of the needs of rural Wisconsin and how some of those communities have not grown. They've been stagnant. And so the question was, how do you try to help those communities? And so we did some brainstorming, and some of those ideas, of course, came back to shared revenue. Then this past summer, late summer, I was working with one of my municipalities, the county of Richland, which is going through some financial stress, particularly with the inflationary pressures over the last 2 years. So I contacted the Wisconsin Counties Association. I said, hey, is there anything you can do to kind of help with Richland County, and do you know of anybody in the Senate that perhaps is working on anything with shared revenue? And Senator Mary Fitzkowski was already kind of setting the groundwork on some ideas on what to do with shared revenue. So really late August, early September of last year is when I know exactly where I pulled over, called Mary, and I said, hey, are you working on something like this? And I said, do you have a lead in the Assembly? And she said, no. And I said, well, I'd sure like to work on that because I know my rural communities and many other rural communities are having similar issues. So back then, she actually made the comment to me. She goes, what if we did 1 cent of the sales tax, and that would be directed right toward local governments, everything from towns, villages, cities. And I said, wow, that's a great idea. And so that's kind of how all this took off. It's been a tremendous undertaking, a lot of work from everybody, a true team effort from everything from our local officials to fellow representatives, fellow senators, to the Wisconsin Counties Association, the Wisconsin Towns Association, the League of Municipalities. It has truly been a team effort, especially when you add Legislative Fiscal Bureau, Legislative Reference Bureau, Legislative Council. So this is a team effort. So today is kind of the capstone of that, to introduce this. And I personally am very excited about the future of this proposal, and that it's going to truly help a lot of our local government. So the idea is we're going to take 1 cent of the sales tax, 20%. It's going to go into a new segregated fund. That segregated fund is going to be called the Local Governmented segregated account, and from that account, we will pay out to locals the current amount they get for shared revenue, all right? And then the state, that right now, that amount, is roughly about, I don't have that in my notes right now, but, that number's not going to change. And then we're going to add new money to counties, towns, villages, and locals. So the new money for counties is going to be $50 million, and that's going to be distributed based on a new formula. Then $176 million will be allocated to towns, villages, and cities. Every community in the state of Wisconsin will see a minimum of a 10% increase, a minimum. Many communities that were, I don't want to say disadvantaged by the previous shared revenue formula, which was frozen in 2004, those communities that were, in my humble opinion, kind of left behind with that formula, they're going to see a bigger bump. And the goal is to try to equalize those levels out. Those two accounts will from there on forward will be tied to the growth of the sales tax in the state. So if the state does well, our locals are going to do well. And I think that's a key point. The formula for the current shared revenue has been frozen since 2004. Our locals have not shared in the growth that the state has had. Now they will be tied to the growth in our sales tax. And I hope our local officials will speak to that, because I know when I talk to my locals, they are incredibly excited about that opportunity to be tied to that sales tax growth. Some other provisions is, as Assembly Republicans, we've been very focused on public safety. And so this new money, the $227 million, need to go to some core services. And those core services are going to be law enforcement, fire protection, emergency medical services, emergency response communications, public works, and transportation. The new $227 million needs to be focused in those areas. And trust me, our communities can use that money in those areas. We're also going to have a $300 million 3-year pilot program called the Innovation Fund. And the whole goal of the Innovation Fund is to have communities work together. And the state will be a partner in that relationship to help spur that innovation, to cooperate and try to be innovative on how they're going to share services. And it can be a whole gamut of things. It could be dispatch, it could be IT services, it could be human resources, it could be fire, police, whatever. The whole goal is to give communities the option, mind you, it's not mandated, to say, hey, we would like you to consider joining together. And then what would that look like? And if that realizes savings, then the state is going to pitch in for 3 years to help with that transition and basically incentivize those communities to take that undertaking. A lot of other new money, in addition to what we're talking about here. We're going to have a significant increase in funding for EMS providers. Currently, we have a funding assistant program that's $2.2 million. We are going to drastically increase that $12.8 million to $15 million each year to our emergency responders, something that our caucus, and I know the Senate caucus, and we've heard, let's be honest, statewide as we've done our listening sessions for the Joint Finance Committee, the need to help our EMS providers that serve our communities. Other key thing is we are going to provide additional funding to law enforcement by doubling the reinvestments for training. Currently, that is set at $160 per officer for training. We're going to double that to $320 million. We're also going to double that fund that they access that money from. So these are just some key investments. We have some other minor changes in the way we're going to do EMS staffing, some other requirements. But I'll tell you, this is a tremendous opportunity for the state of Wisconsin, and I truly couldn't be prouder of the team that we assembled to put this together, because it is a monumental effort, and everybody has stepped up to the plate. We've been collaborative, we've been working hard, bipartisan, across the board to get something like this done. And so I'm excited about it, I'm very proud of it, and I hope, I'm pretty confident our local officials, like the Mayor, Becky Gluen, is going to speak here from Beaver Dam, and I sure hope Beaver Dam, and I sure hope you're excited as much as I am.
Very much. Thank you. Speaking from Beavertown, I want to thank everyone for the invitation to be here to speak today. It's really an honor, and I just want to thank the opportunity to talk about some of the issues that cities have been facing, villages, townships, our counties across the state, and appreciate the conversations that are happening, the discussion and the solutions that are coming forward, and problem solving that's happening around the state by our legislators right now in talking about these issues. I want to thank the League of Municipalities and their support for all of our communities and advocating for us and bringing us together as a voice so that we could communicate better and come together around our messaging. Also want to speak and say thank you to our constituents who have understood the problems that we face at a local level and have also been supportive and trying to move progress forward. And of course, I want to thank all the individuals that are here today that are working towards making solutions happen, but also a special shout out to my representative, Mark Bourne, who I have a good relationship with and we've worked closely with over the last 6 years, and appreciate his work that he's been taking forward on these issues. The city of Beaver Dam itself is a community of about 17,000 people. And just to put into perspective, we've lost almost 38% of our state shared funding over the last 23 years. It has a huge impact on our daily day-to-day business, and that's not even taking into consideration on inflation over that time. And of course, we know over the last year or so, that's been a huge impact, even greater so. So we appreciate the coming together and looking at how we can come to solutions on this, a sustainable funding source for our communities. The local taxpayer understands the problems of losing almost $9 million for a community our size over that time. When you look at roads, when you look at infrastructure, when you look at the support that we can give to our EMS and police, it's critically, critically important. And so we're very, very thankful that all of you as leaders are working towards solutions to these problems. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I am Emily McFarland. I'm the mayor of the city of Watertown. And I'm thrilled to stand in this room today to be able to talk about this important topic. I am encouraged and I'm grateful. And while we know we haven't yet crossed the finish line, certainly there's still 2 houses of legislature and a governor that needs to sign this. I'm just thankful that today I have a finish line to set my eyes upon, that we're in a position that we can stand in this room here today. And we wouldn't be here without the folks standing behind me and their teams. I'm especially thankful to Speaker Voss for his stewardship of this issue. Obviously, Representative Bourne, Representative Kurtz, Majority Leader Lemahieu, as well as Senator Falskowski and Senator Markline, and all of their staff. I know that there's a lot that goes into getting us to these positions, and I want to make sure everyone understands just how grateful we are to finally be here. I can tell you, I have been with the city for 10 years, and we've been through some difficult budgets, and one that I will never forget is the year that we considered shutting off every other streetlight in the city of Watertown to save $250,000. And while we are still going to face, difficult conversations and contemplations, I know that this is going to afford us an opportunity to have those conversations in a much more strategic and nimble manner, a manner that's responsive to the market and a manner that allows us to provide what our residents need, and that is public safety, infrastructure, and critical services. So on behalf of my colleagues from around the state, I want to thank everyone who's been a part of getting us to today, and I am encouraged to see that we have a finish line to focus on.
Jerry, do you want to say something?
Sure. Thank you. I'm Jerry Durr. I'm the chair of the town of Bristol, 30 minutes from the capital in northeast Dane County. Also president of the Wisconsin Towns Association, which I represent 1,244 plus towns in the state. And so our constituency is wide. Our communities are varied from 25,000 to one of our towns has like 40 people. That's the variation that we have across the state. I want to thank the legislators and the speaker for coming, bringing this group together. Leadership is easy when there are no controversial issues. It gets tougher when there are issues like we've been dealing with. And of course, we know that the shared revenue process has been flawed, it's been broken, and it's been frozen, broken. It's even worse. So we're looking for the opportunity here that there's going to be some revenue, the possibility that that revenue will grow as sales tax grows. That's a positive thing for us. Our situation, our emergency services costs have gone from $100,000 15 years ago to $400,000. Our community, which is 4,400 people, we spend more now on emergency services than we do on fixing our roads. And of course, what's the priority? Emergency services is always a priority. That's got to be. So if you drive through a few potholes, that's one thing, but if you can't respond with ambulance and fire service, that's a whole different ballgame. So we recognize what it takes to do that. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and that the legislature is going to come to an agreement on what we're talking about. This will be a monumental change in how we do government. Obviously, our taxpayers recognize that it's either potholes or raise taxes. And raising taxes a lot of times under levy limits means borrowing money. Now with inflation and interest rates, that's a bigger deal even yet. So appreciate being here today. Thank the legislators for their work. Somebody mentioned the finish line. We got to get to the finish line. And this is hard work, but it's work worth doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. I think monumental change was a good way to put it. Historic investments and reforms, and Representative Kurtz and I can take some questions on the legislation now if there are any.
Could you speak to Milwaukee and Milwaukee County? How does that fit into the legislation?
They will be part of this package, and there will be a press conference in Milwaukee this afternoon that will cover those Milwaukee parts of the plan. So tune into that.
Can you speak in broad terms, though, about like what the Milwaukee part will be? So we have to write about that as well.
Yeah, well, we won't be speaking here about that because we're focused on another major part of this, which is historic investments and reforms statewide that will help communities statewide. And so that's certainly what we're highlighting this morning. And yes, an important part of the package will be the Milwaukee, and that will be this afternoon.
Just in very broad strokes, sales tax, can you talk about that for Milwaukee?
Are there questions about the statewide historic reforms and investments that we're making also?
Reading the details, there are restrictions on public health officials, there's quarry regulations in here. Is it fair to phrase it as a trade-off of what Republicans want them to look like locally in exchange for this money? You're putting restrictions on how they operate to get these funds?
I think the way that I would put it is we are making historic major reform in this legislation, which requires compromise. So there are things that end up in bills like this that people will love. There's things that people will not love. That's how you get broad support, hopefully bipartisan support, by having a big variety of things. So there are a number of things that members of our caucus that think are important. There's a number of things that members of other caucuses will think are important, and that's how you build a big, broad reform like we're building here.
But does it undercut the Republican stance for years of local control? I've heard local control for years from you guys, but you're placing more and more restrictions on locals operating. So is it local control don't do things where we want you to do them?
I think that that's not the way I would characterize it. I think that there are times where local control is absolutely the best as a former local official, and there's times where statewide standards are needed, and that's always the balance that we're looking at here in the state of Wisconsin.
Are you going to give the media anything on paper about this proposal, or is that going to wait till you're done with all your news conferences today?
Do you know when the bill's introduced?
Give us on paper with the details?
Hopefully, beginning of next week, we're going to have something out. We're still working a few little details out, but we're very, very close.
No fiscal, no nothing until next
You
week?
got nothing on paper to share today.
We're going to wait till next week until we get a little bit more.
All right, thanks,
How on
everybody.
board, how on board is the Senate with this?
Thank you.
proposal? You talk about the Senate relationship on this proposal?
As we both mentioned, we've been working with both houses for months and months, and have a lot of good general support on a number of parts of the bill. Thank you.